What I'd like to do is take a question from the audience. If there are questions, could I have the woman with the red-orange top there? Yes. Could you introduce yourself, please, and ask your question in a succinct way?
Okay, this is live then, great. So I'm Hermione Crease. I work in Cambridge. I work in the green tech sector, I guess. Simple question. For most people in this room, I guess, even beyond their transport costs, the use of energy to heat our homes is going to be their major contribution to climate change. So it's critical that we reduce the carbon burden of home heating. I'd like to know what the panel think are the biggest barriers to accomplishing that, and what sort of policies you might enact to address those barriers.
Water, not so much the technology. Thank you so much for your question, Hermione. I think it's a really pertinent one. I think I touched on earlier how, particularly in Cambridge, one of the most fundamental things we could do is around our housing. A vast majority of our housing in Cambridge is not modern. And if we look at the housing of some of the most vulnerable people who are most affected by those high bills, which is our council housing, a large proportion of that is quite old and actually isn't particularly suitable to be retrofitted. But retrofit has to be the answer. It's complicated currently, and something the Liberal Democrats have been asking for within the City Council for many years is how the council can work to support that process. And fundamentally, we have to make it quicker and we have to make it cheaper. And as we all know from any works you've had done in your own home, it is much cheaper to put the scaffolding up once, isn't it? If you can do the whole street, you and your neighbours can do it together, it's quicker and it's cheaper for everywhere. So on a city level, we've been campaigning locally for schemes from the council to help support that. So to offer grants, for instance, for a street to get together and do that collaboratively, because then it's just easier in terms of resources and makes a fundamental difference. I'm also very proud that something the Liberal Democrats brought forward in the City Council was grey water recycling within all new council homes. So the council has a rapid council house building project, but now, as of about 3 years ago, due to one of my colleagues, all of those new households will need to be fitted with grey water recycling, which will help to reduce the water bills and conserve our precious water. Nationally, retrofit is a huge challenge as well, which is why one of my kind of key items from the Liberal Democrat manifesto was exactly around retrofit. So the Liberal Democrats would create a home energy programme, and this would look to combine social justice, which is the aspect of affordability and reducing the bills, with climate justice, which is the carbon emissions. And so we'd look to introduce a home retrofit programme so that people on the lowest incomes will be offered grants to upgrade their homes for free to achieve both of those objectives of being a fairer, more equal society, but also one that does less damage to the environment.
So the Green Party would follow the Green New Deal for housing. So we would empower local authorities to bring empty homes back into use, and create a total of 150,000 new homes for social rent. And we would build those to passive house or equivalent. So this standard will see these new homes use 90% less energy for space heating than the average home, significantly reducing household bills. We would improve the insulation of every UK home that needs more insulation by 2030. The material for these insulation improvements will be sustainable. Significantly reduce heating bills as well by improving 1 million existing homes and other buildings every year so that they reach the highest standard of energy efficiency. Homes lived in by people on low incomes will be the first to receive these major improvements and benefit from reduced heating bills. This will be a deep retrofitting of 10 million homes by 2030 on top of the insulation improvements every home that needs it will receive. So other parties as well can adopt the Green New Deal. It's not just the Green Party. Insulate non-domestic buildings, addressing large amounts of energy loss from offices and public buildings, and transform the planning system so that new buildings built by private developers are built to the passive house. So yeah, the biggest barrier, of course, is investment into renewable energy for making homes more sustainable. So that's why we would see a massive investment. We would push the government for a massive investment in green ecological technologies. Thank you.
To my opening observations about the importance of Great British Energy and decarbonising the power sector by 2030, which is an absolutely massive ambition. And that will enable people not only to have lower carbon energy to heat their homes, but will also, in fact, probably produce lower bills, almost certainly produce lower bills, because the way at the moment we're tied into the extraordinary international energy pricing system. Became very, very obvious during the crisis caused by Putin a couple of years ago, that the way the energy system pricing works was locking us in to very high costs of the gas system at a time when we actually have renewables here. What is, of course, most disappointing is that the Conservative government's obsession with no onshore wind has cost us all very, very dear. Again, a lost decade, which we will turn around immediately. There are so many things that can be done, offshore floating wind. The technologies are there to allow this transformation to happen. I think it just requires the political ambition to do it. Alongside that, of course, stop wasting energy, which means insulating our homes. And again, it is just heartbreaking to look at what happened after 2010. I remember before I was elected, long before I was elected here, working with people locally on the home insulation schemes, which were working before 2010. I remember challenging Boris Johnson at Prime Minister's questions on this. Why are so few home insulation schemes working now? No answer did there come. We can do it again. So there's lots and lots that can be done. But finally, stop allowing houses to be built at lower building standards. Again, why were the building standards lowered in 2010? Well, you can change it again, but what the tragedy is, we've seen so many houses built around Cambridge, which could have been built to higher standards, which weren't. So retrofitting, yes, but we should never have been in that position in the first place.
Thank you. So the question, to remind ourselves, what were the biggest barriers stopping us doing more on this? And I think, frankly, it's the cost and practicalities of getting the average person to do it. I think most reasonable people, when you speak to them, acknowledge this is a massive problem, and most people want to do every little bit they can to help. But it's not as easy for everybody to invest in a new heat pump, to spend £10,000 in a boiler, to change to an electric car as much as they might want to. So the issue is trying to reduce the cost of moving to these new technologies, these new ways of living. And this is why Rishi Sunak has been quite clear on maintaining the fact that net zero is a stonewall commitment, but we have to do it in a proportionate and pragmatic way for working people. So the focus of this government has been bringing in investment. Since 2010, we've had over £300 billion worth of investment come in towards clean energy projects. Ultimately, this is going to bring the cost of things like electric cars down, the cost of heat pumps down, and eventually it's going to be affordable for people. And I'm convinced people will bite your hand off if they can afford it. It's not a lack of want, it's a lack of means. And as I say, this government are making progress on that. And we're seeing it already with the cost of things like electric cars already coming down from where they were 5 or 10 years ago. But like I say, investment is key. It's making it practical for people. It's helping to develop the new technology of the future, which is going to help us get to where we want to be by 2050. But it's also making sure that climate change is at the heart of planning, as has been mentioned so far, and any new initiative that any private enterprise does. So I've been a councillor in the past where I live, and I was part of shaping the new neighbourhood plan in our area. And I created the climate change section, which basically said every new development in our area needed to take into account climate change and not add to our emissions with every new development. And straight away, the businesses got that message, knew what we were trying to achieve, and designed with that in mind. So just to wrap up, the main challenges are cost and practicality for people. And as much as we all want to get there, we have to acknowledge it's not as easy for everybody to pay the sums that are required for some of the technologies we're talking about.
Thank you. Now, Cambridge is a very unique city, very smart people living here. So what I would like to say, climate changes is like cancer. As well, housing and the heating for houses is like going up and up. Now, if we are talking about a plan of 2030, 2050, this long time, it's like cancer. If you leave it longer, more damage to the climate, more damage to the people. So we have to act now. For me, I tell the patients, to be honest, all of the time, if you leave your cancer longer without treatment, it's going to kill you. We are facing similar situation here. If we leave the problem 2030, 2050, we are going to have more trouble, more problems. Our people struggling to feed their kids. our people struggling to even pay the transport to their work, how we can ask them to change or improve the isolation in their house. We have to act. When we say, oh, how we can do it, yes, we can do it. We have to divert the money for better isolation. We have to divert the money to protect our people, to feed our people, to improve their housing. There's 100,000 people waiting for housing here in the country. How we can ask them, oh, can you change the heating type or the isolation type? They don't have house. They don't have food for their kids. I was watching my patients and my nursing team, doctors suffering. The highest suicide among doctors. Why? Because they got money for isolation. No, this is the reason why we need to divert the money from the start, from here and there, to improve our city. Let's start with the city. But if we are talking about the country in total, if we are talking about UK, and we are not even managed to solve the problem here in Cambridge suffering. How 10 years of suffering is getting, this is next to the Cambridge Council, is dirty, is destroyed. We need 5 years just to build the city itself. What about the nation? What about our country? What we need to do here, we have to act now. As you said, bless you, you said we need new faces to change, to act for the people now, not tomorrow or next year or 2030, 2050. It's not good. Thank you.
I don't believe in taking measures that destroy the whole country in order to solve a problem. I also believe that we can do things in a sensible way. We need to reduce people's bills, heating bills. We need to reduce the emissions. So the best way is insulation, retrofitting of homes, right, where possible. I don't see what else can be done to answer your question. Insulation and pray for mild winters, which ironically, global warming is going to bring us, right? So in a way, yeah, that's it.
Can I go back to you for a minute? Yeah. Do you feel that people have responded to your question?
Yes, I cheated. I asked a question about which I know quite a bit. I would say it's quite correct to say, actually, that the Conservatives have been reasonably helpful and supportive of insulation and retrofit in the public sector, in public housing. It's also quite correct to say that they have discontinued a range of public support in a way, a stop-start way, that has been very destructive to the supply chain in retrofit. So Daniel's point on that is completely correct. I am satisfied that with the range of policies that have been put out in front, I think there's an awful lot of practical detail that is you haven't got time to go into this evening, but yeah, most people seem to get it.
One question that I wanted to take from some of the questions that were put up earlier from Sarah Hughes. Is Sarah Hughes in the audience? Sarah, you asked a question about transport. Would you like to ask it to the audience now? I mean,
Asking my question on behalf of the Cambridgeshire Sustainable Travel Alliance. We're an alliance of 31 organisations active in the areas of transport, environment and health. Transport accounts for a significant proportion of our region's carbon emissions, around 20% in Cambridge City and over 40% in the wider Cambridgeshire and Peterborough combined authority area. Surveys show that people want to drive less and use sustainable transport more, but often have to use a car because other options aren't available. If elected, what would you and your party do to give people the choice to opt for low carbon forms of transport?
so a question on how we can encourage people to be driving less, to take on low carbon forms of transport. David, would you like to start us off, please?
So this is a big issue, isn't it? Because especially in the countryside, the density of public transport is so low that you don't really have a choice but to drive. If you need to go anywhere, the distances are usually quite long. In town, it's a bit easier, especially in a small town like Cambridge. We can use our bicycles or walk if we are able-bodied. But there again, there's people who need the car to get about. There's a new technology coming out, which is the electric car. It's been around for a few years. It's still not, it's still not 100% sure what the saving in carbon is going to be between an electric car and a normal car, a petrol car, because there's the life cycle, there's the production. I don't know the exact figures. Basically, we're going to perhaps gradually solve this problem. More electric cars, better made, better ways of manufacturing them, a bit more transport, perhaps converting more buses to electricity. A big thing would be to convert more rail to electric from diesel. And yeah, that could solve it partly.
Thank you. Shane, would you like to go next?
Of course, thank you. So the Conservative position on this is we need to have a combination of both short, medium and long-term solutions to this. Acknowledge the council are looking at having more bus options, which I think is not a bad idea, but we need to be more strategic and more long-term. And the Conservative position on this is we need to explore a light rail, so a kind of tram network through Cambridge. It works in many cities across the world. Its research shows that it's the best way to make a modal shift, so to move people away from their cars, because it is a genuine way of getting around the city sustainably and cheaply as well. We have to acknowledge people need their cars, and it's been mentioned already. 60% of low-income families have a car and need a car to get around, and it's a way to help those with social mobility to get to where they need to be and do what they need to do. Whether it's a family and a parent needing to drop their kid off at school and then drive to work, a bus isn't going to be the answer. Whether it's an elderly person who sees their car as their means of freedom and liberation, a bus isn't going to cut it. But like I say, we need to be more strategic and look at something more revolutionary. Yes, more expensive. Yes, it's going to take longer. But as we've all acknowledged, this isn't a small issue that's going to go away in a couple of years. We need to think big. And with the population of Cambridge just increasing, we need to think of something more longer term. So I acknowledge that the bus route being a good one. I think over 10 years ago, it came up as the go-to solution. And that was on the prediction that Cambridge's population would be 147,000 by 2031. Friends, we hit that number in 2021, and the population is only going to grow. So yes, buses are fine, but they're not free from pollution either. Whereas it's proven in all the cities where light rail has been used that it lowers emissions, it lowers the cost for consumers, and it's something that a city like Cambridge should be embracing. So if I was elected as your MP, I'd be advocating strongly for both short-term solutions, which we can achieve now, because I acknowledge the problem exists today, but we also need to think long-term. We need to think strategically about what the future of Cambridge looks like. And to me, for transport, that's a light rail network.
Transport in 2 minutes. It's been a touch controversial, this subject in Cambridge, hasn't it, over the last couple of years? So we know how difficult it is. Look, first of all, obviously, Cambridge is a national leader in terms of cycling and active travel, and we just need to keep on making that better and better and better. And I'm pleased to see some of the improvements in terms of cycling infrastructure. But can't be the only solution. I hate to sound like a broken record here, but it is about electrification again, which goes back to my earlier points. I won't repeat them, but that is going to be key to getting electric vehicles to be operating, electric buses. I've always argued that we needed a better bus system in Cambridge. I'm afraid it's stuck at the moment on that basic question of finding ways of getting the road space. And that may be something we have to grapple with again. Could we go for underground, light rail, and all the rest of it? Hugely expensive and not very quick to deliver, I'm afraid. So the quicker solutions are encouraging more and more people to take the active travel solution and actually having a public transport system that works for everybody. But I say that's not been proven that easy to deliver in this city so far.
Okay, so green politics is about fair green solutions that make life better. And we've been suggesting credible and sensible solutions to our public transport problem for years now, which is the main barrier for getting people out of cars. They just can't see that the public transport is there for them. You try waiting for a bus, it's a labour of love in Cambridge. We're still not there. We've got a long way to go, and it's just buses. Like, come on. In terms of cycling as well, it's. I mean, a lot of people won't even cycle in Cambridge because they find it too dangerous. There's a real lack of designated cycle paths. I live in Coleridge. We've been waiting since 2019 for just a designated cycle path all the way up Cherry Hinton Road. I mean, I feel like I'm dicing with death there sometimes in doing the school run. So we need those desperately now. Those can be easily done. Just get, surely it can't be that hard to find funding just to put some paint on the road. In terms of funding sources, just to go back to funding a bus system that's fully electric, very frequent, cheap, reliable, things we expect now in 2024. The funding sources must be found that will not cause financial hardship. The £5 or £10 daily charge that was proposed, it would have caused even greater financial inequality. And we've been proposing alternative solutions to the funding problem for years now. The workplace parking levy, we've come up with a tourist tax. We're glad to see that there's a mayoral precept now for tax to get the funding for the buses. So yeah, in the meantime, we're still waiting, aren't we? Thank you.
For your question, Sarah, for me, I think there's three things. And firstly, I do agree that the future looks towards light rail, but I do also note that the Conservative mayor for the combined authority where this would sit spent 5 years failing to provide any kind of hope of funding for it. So I think the role of an MP in that is to make the argument that actually if Cambridge is going to become the centre of the UK and the UK's next Silicon Valley or whatever other kind of fresh hell Michael Gove has planned for us, part of that deal has to be that they stump up the proper funds needed for a rapid transport system, because without it, we simply cannot sustain that level of growth because we cannot get people into the jobs that they need to do. So I do agree with you that that is the future, but perhaps not in quite the same way. I think secondly, a key part of this will be for the future, will be around the bus routes. And currently a big problem with our bus service is they sit within the grip of Stagecoach, who are rubbish. And you can wait hours and hours for a bus that doesn't come. And then all they do is take off the routes and you're absolutely stuck. So I think one of the key steps that we need to take, and I know the County Council are looking at how you might go about doing this, is a franchise bus system that could come within the local authority control. So we're not forced to run bus routes as Stagecoach are just for profits. It could be there are some smaller routes on little buses that go to places people need to go that maybe make a loss because there'll be others sustaining that. So we could be a bit more flexible. So I think those smaller buses, which should move towards being electric on routes where you need to be. And also we need to win the argument that actually it is possible to conduct your life on the buses. And for me, one of the reasons why the arguments around the congestion charge simply didn't work for people was because we hadn't won the argument first that you could live your life on a bus. You can get from A to B. We need to reduce the fares, make sure they run regularly to prove to people they can make that modal shift before we introduce the stick of the charge. And finally, really quickly, the other part is some of the simple things, the cycleways, the potholes. A number of my residents in Castle who say, I did used to cycle, but I fell off and broke my nose and now there's no chance ever again. Lighting, for instance, on the footways. And also I think for the police putting cycle theft as a priority, particularly around the train stations, which is one of the key reasons people don't do it. So that's my 3 points.
Thank you, Susan, for the question. To be honest, there's a few points here I would like to say is number one, do you think our infrastructure for cycling is safe? This is our roads. One picture just, I can make hundreds, but I don't have the budget. Because really it's not safe. People who's doing scooters as well, do you think it's safe? People running in the nights, in the evening, freezing weather, do you think it's safe? It's not safe. This is dangerous. Our city became dangerous to use for cycling community, for scooters, to go around. We have more fractures than ever. Now, number one. Number two, I'm the only candidate here talking about blue energy. Do you think green energy is safe? No. Green energy, we are destroying countries to get the lithium from there. They're starving now. They have farms problem. We have disaster. And then I spoke to a few experts about lithium. What do we do with the lithium? We have thousands, millions of cars, buses. And guess what? We don't know. We can't recycle it. So what we do, we don't know. We are waiting for a disaster from lithium. Number one, so more cancer here, we're talking more diseases from lithium. We are going to face disaster in the future because of lithium. Lots of lithium here and there. Number three, number three here, we have to divert to something called blue energy, liquid hydrogen. Liquid hydrogen, believe it or not, we have a very big factor here producing the machines which making the liquid hydrogen. But guess what? What we are doing, we sell it to Spain, to Belgium, to Germany. They are doing very well with the liquid hydrogen. The end cycle of the liquid hydrogen is what? Water and hydrogen. It's very eco. So we need eco transport, eco buses. Now, some airlines, they change their airlines or planes to liquid hydrogen. So, and some buses as well in Europe. So why we are behind Europe? We have to switch to more eco, to more green. Lithium is not the only green, which I question the lithium. So please, we have to change now before the disaster. And we have to help the community. Thank you, Mia. I will stop for now, but I hope the message, you got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Sarah, can I ask you again to just respond? Do you feel that your question was answered by the panel? Is there anything missing that you were hoping for?
Thank you. I do feel I've heard lots of different ideas of how to solve the problem, but very little about how to fund them. And maybe that requires a bit more thought.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.